Hello, friends. Welcome back. It's time for some more Crazy8s SignalR epic tale of building a SignalR app. Um, we've got our fabulous guest here, David Pine. David's from the Microsoft Docs team. He joined us last week on our SignalR streams. And, it's kind of like feeding stray cats. Once you do it, they keep coming back. No, David's here to school us in some C#9 today. So we built the app. We tried to just get it done and get our proof of concept built in the quickest way possible. So we relied heavily on just basic class types and lists and things like that. And David was pulling his hair out in the chat room, screaming, "Use records, use hash sets. Don't do these bad things."
Oh,
So I invited him back to give us some insight as to how we can code this up better. And we appreciate having you on, David.
awesome. Thank you so much. Excited to be here. I can't promise that it's going to be better, but this will be an endeavor of vulnerable refactoring. So we've got a 2-hour session planned, and we're going to just kind of take a step back and iterate through some stuff pretty quickly. I'm going to show you kind of the thought process behind why you might want to refactor certain things, and we'll do a little cleanup and stuff like that. And along the way, we'll try to introduce some new concepts like C#9, some stuff from .NET 5, and yeah, we'll go from there. Should be fun.
And Alyssa is here with me as well. Alyssa's learning C#.
Yes, and I'm so excited about the refactor. I feel like this is when I'm going to actually start learning like C#, because Ed is like, magic hands, look at all this functionality. So I think slowing down a little bit will be good for me. So
Awesome.
C#9 it shortens some of the syntax up a bit too. So we saw some of my old school methods of doing things. I think I said it was like sedimentary rock of development. Like I learned in this era of C#, and then I executed in this era of C#, and then now we have all this new C#9 stuff. So you can see like all of the old practices and stuff that I used. Kind
how
of
long
blending
has
in with some
9
new
been
stuff.
Since November, officially. So it shipped as part of .NET 5, which was November of last year.
Yeah, so really new stuff in the scope of the lifetime of C# in general.
So should I start just hacking away?
Absolutely. Why don't we do a quick like review of what we have, like what does the app do, and
Sure.
kind of just the 10,000
yeah.
foot view of how it does it.
Sure. So this is a Blazor WebAssembly application, and it's utilizing SignalR. So we've got a server, we have some shared bits, we have a client, we actually have tests because we're good developers. And if
Tests. You said it plural, like we did more than one, but
well, that's what the class says. I know that there's only one test in there, but we're testing 52 cards. So technically, like, give or take. I'm just going to run it real quick and we'll show you what the app does. Wait for it, press buttons, it launches. And I'm using Visual Studio proper. I know that a lot of the stuff was kind of developed with VS Code. So there might be some differences with the user interface and our developing tool set.
yeah,
So
like the light theme that you're using and blinding everyone in the
no,
chat room.
yeah, Ancient Coder is complaining, but I'm like blind over here, so I like it.
I do light theme on purpose. In fact, I do that specific for anytime I'm streaming, and lots of people prefer it actually to the dark theme. I'm always a dark theme myself.
Really? So if you were alone right now, it would be on dark theme.
Yep. That's how I roll. So we've got chat, which just kind of exemplifies some of the moving parts of SignalR. We've got a table that identifies our Crazy8s tables. We've got players, our draw pile, our discard pile. The game hasn't started yet. And when you click on game, it actually opens up another tab. And in this tab, you can see we've got 0 cards. Username is David. I'm just going to join a lonesome, lonely game by myself and start
Can
it.
you share your server with me? We have live share running, David and
I. How do I do that?
it's in the Visual Studio interface on one of the. Well, I think you closed your server though.
Share. Well, don't I have to do it like before? Join live share.
No, you can do it while it's running. So go to live share. It should pull up a panel. There's one down there, yeah. And then you'll have a tab. So when you run the server, there should be a tab there to add and share the server. And then what's cool is I can get on my web browser and I can join your game.
Live share. Where is that other window? Live unit testing. Aren't you bothered by the fact that like some of your windows disappear once you're running versus not running?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Live share, other windows view. Okay. So now, okay. So here, is this what I want to share? No, shared servers.
Yeah, it's hard for me to see on the stream here. Let's see. Yeah, you have shared server 0. So see if up in the toolbar up there by the little stop and all that, share terminal.
Manage,
yeah. There you hit manage. And then add.
Port 5001, right? Localhost.
And hit add or OK. There we go.
Whoops. Come on. Wait for it. It didn't like that one. 5,000.
Oh, it didn't like it?
Now it's expecting this other one. So there. Okay. So now that should be shared.
All right. So and
if you open up yours, you should be able to go to game.
I was complaining about live share before the stream, and I'm going to do it again.
Come on.
In a professional way and say that it's not doing anything. It says empty response, no data available. So we can skip that part.
I think this has to do with the get ignore.
Oh, you told Alyssa about that?
Yeah.
Oh, you don't even know, David. I was struggling for the whole week, and it's like I didn't even look at the get ignore. What made you think to look in the get ignore?
Well, I started debugging and I realized that www root. So yeah, here's the backstory. So here's what happened. Ed invites me on the show again to do this refactor. I accept happily and I pull the repo down to kind of prep myself for getting familiar with the code base. And I go to run it as any good developer would do. And when it starts debugging, there's this weird error. And it's basically saying that it can't, it's like 404ing. I'm like, what? It can't find, what can it find? And it says it can't find, the index or, even anything to start with. I'm like, oh, wait, where's the www root? That's the folder hierarchy that typically serves our static files. So
is that like dist in another project? It's
similar. So this is our index.html. This is what actually starts up the entire application. This is what's served. And then from that, right, WebAssembly and Blazor will, queue on this app identifier. And that's why when you first see the app start, you see like this little loading left in the top left. So this is the first thing that has to execute. And then WebAssembly.
I literally was just like on those 404s and I was like, I must have done it wrong. Like I was looking at my .NET version.
I felt so bad.
And then, I messaged Ed and I was like, hey, Ed, see this line here in this get ignore? You don't want to do that. He's like, oh. All right. So anyways, the app runs, it does its thing. It's pretty slick. What I'm going to do is we're going to start back over here though. So for the official refactor, we're going to start looking at some of the C# files. One of the advantages with Blazor is you get this notion of like a shared library because your client side, Razor, your Blazor components and whatnot, they can actually use C# models. So if you have a model on your server that's behind a web API and you're serializing that over the wire and your client's consuming it, it can be deserialized into the same shape of that object. So that way you can share your C# models. So we have this notion of shared.
When you say model, do you mean like interface?
Yeah, essentially. It's just like the contract, but these aren't actually interfaces because they're concrete classes. So it's the same type of concept though. So it's the shape of our objects, right?
And you're saying that the client side and the server side can share models.
Yep. So that's one of the big advantages. They can actually share the same model. So if we have a web API in our server that's responding, like if you have like some sort of GET request that returns cards, for example, or a deck of cards, the shape of that response, like being array with, value in suit, that we could deserialize that on the client into the same class that was used to serialize it from the server. So it gives you this parity.
This isn't new to 9, or it is new to
This
9?
is new with the concept of Blazor, because you can have C# in the client.
Okay.
So let's start refactoring this. So we have this card class. One thing I like to do is I like to remove unnecessary using statements. So those weren't needed. And we have another little opportunity here. These are just minor little edits before we turn these into records. So I made this an expression bodied member. So it's the toString is the value of the suit. That's all good for now. We'll save that. Go to game utilities. I'm also going to get rid of some of these usings. And I'm going to move this down here. There was a space there. I don't actually know if that ends up being a comment that's visible for Shuffle or not, because it's not directly tied to that. The other thing is with C#9, they introduced, well, you're using it down here actually, this new for the random, but we can use that also for the new on the list. We can just say new list. The other thing,
I wasn't 100% aware that you could use the new statement and still pass parameters in. So
absolutely.
I thought it was just empty constructors. I just haven't read through the latest changes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that's definitely possible. And then the other thing is we can actually take this random property or this variable, instead of newing it up every single time, since we're in the context of an extension method, we can just say static read only random. I'm going to name it random and then say new. And then I'm going to do int date time dot now dot ticks. And this is a way to kind of seed random so that it's truly random. And then we can get rid of it there, since we're going to use the static version instead. And instead of being RNG, I don't know what RNG stood for. That's not random.
Number generator, I think, is the common shorthand.
I guess that makes sense. And again, so a lot of my opinions are going to come through with this refactor, so you can take or leave what you want. This is just kind of how I would look at this and refactor it if it was mine to own, right, so to speak.
So when you have static read-only random and it's newing up random number generator, it's static read-only. So when is that value assigned? It's assigned when you call on any of the static methods, because there's a static class has no instance.
Right. Yeah. Since it's static read-only, it's the fields are initialized first. So there's like a precedence. So since it's static read-only, and this is a static method, the fields are initialized before the static method is called into. So it's safe, because it's as soon as it's trying to use it here within the context of the static method, it's saying, okay, we have it here and it's assigned to this.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, I guess there's just a few little things. Let me see what I would do here. So this is our source. So I'd rename this. This is just me doing things that I would do. And this is really the result.
Yeah, this is, if you look at the source code for link, this is the same type of terminology that they use in there as well. Source and selector are two of the common terms.
Sure. And call it count, because it's count. I var all the things typically, so I'm bad that way. I don't know if you like explicitness or not. You're saying T, but it can just be var, but it's shorter.
I think some of this stuff here.
What was T then? I didn't even know that was the same as like a.
So T is the generic type. So it's a public static method named shuffle that extends. This keyword basically says that this is an extension method. So we can walk up to any instance of iList of T, and T is a generic type. So like with TypeScript, we have type parameters. So we could say that this is going to be a list of anything. The consumer knows what the list type is because it itself has defined that type somewhere.
And David, I don't know how this applies to refactoring, but the chat room is trying to refactor us into dark mode.
Like everyone wants dark mode?
I think there was a poll, and I think dark won. I don't know.
All right. We're going dark. All right, let's do it. But we're gonna do.
We might have a riot if we don't. So
we're gonna do pine dark though. We're doing pine dark. That's the Pine Gap dark from Layla Codes It. She showed this to me.
Oh, I love her. I'm excited to see it. Wait, is this available in the VS Code too? I'm assuming. I think surely.
Yeah,
yeah, I like this theme. This is a good one.
Beautiful.
Yeah, this is a theme she shared with me, and I had fallen in love with it. And I love it because it says pine, so it's like, yeah, it's, you know, it was made for me. So I'm good with that.
Okay, so you were saying that you can make it of type T.
Yeah, so there's
I guess the confusing part was the value. Yeah, that part. What?
So T is our generic type defined in this. So if we hover over T, T is just a generic. So it doesn't know what type it is. So it's saying we can work on any type. So when we declare the value here, we're declaring it of type T, right? So that's just generics in C#, and that's been there forever. What I'm saying is we don't even have to say explicitly that it's this implicit type parameter of T. We can just say var, right? Much like you would in TypeScript or JavaScript.
And it still works.
It still works. It absolutely still works. Yep.
Okay.
There was another refactor that I was considering, and so for me, like I looked at this and I thought this was cool. So we're doing nested for eaches. Mm-hmm. For me, typically nested for eaches was like a code smell. This is what my algorithms and C# teacher had taught me years and years ago. She had said that if ever you have nested for loops, that's a code smell. You should look at using link or refactoring that somehow. And I was like, well, what could we do here differently? So we're creating a deck. And if we take a step back and look at Crazy8s, we're creating a deck. But one thing that we're doing is the use pattern is whenever we create the deck, we're shuffling it. So why not name this get shuffled deck, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to give it a shuffled deck.
You're going to break my unit test.
Nope, I'm going to fix it. Trust me. You're only checking the count, so it still works. I did this before. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to introduce, we're just going to comment this out real quick. Control KC. And we're going to express this.
So you're going to do it online.
Well, it's going to be multiple lines still, but it's going to be link. We're going to use a little bit of link. So we're going to get values, and we're going to say the type of, just like we did before, type of the card suit. And then we're going to cast to card suit. And then we're going to need to pull in a reference to link at this point. So system.link, we'll import that. Then we're going to do select. And now we're going to have a suit in our fat arrow expression. And what we're going to do here is we're actually going to use a tuple. So we're going to say suit equals our suit, and then values, a name property values, which is going to be expressed as enum dot get values, type of our card value, and then we're going to cast that as the card value, and then now that we have our selection of that, we're going to do a select many. So we're projecting our suit. So at this point in time, we're going to have a suit with the corresponding values. So heart with all of the heart values for those cards. So in our tuple, we're just going to call it a pair, right? Because this is a pair of things. We're going to say pair dot values, and then pair, and then value for each individual value is expressed as a new card. So then we're going to have the value and the pair dot suit. And then we're going to say to list and then dot shuffle. So now consumers of this will get the exact same thing that you had before, except for it's going to be shuffled. And it's expressed as this link evaluation. So rather than having nested loops and that stuff, you can, this is a preference of mine. This is the way that I tend to write C#. I try to use link as much as possible and deferred execution and things of that nature. And we're talking about 52 cards. So it's not like this is going to be a huge performance hit or, there's no huge implications, but it's just a mindset. This is typically how I'll try to refactor things. So it ends up being expressed like that. So to kind of summarize, we have got a public static list that returns cards called get shuffled deck. It's expressed as enum.getValues of the card suit, casted as card suits. We're going to select each suit and then the corresponding values for those. We're going to select many, which is a projection of kind of flattening our hierarchy. So for all of the values in our pairs, we're going to get a new card that represents the suit and value for those pairs. We're going to list it, and then we're going to shuffle it.
So I've got a couple things to unpack here. First of all, when we do this type of work, it's important to remember the skill level of the rest of your team.
Yeah.
So if the rest of your team is more in the kind of mindset of for each loops, the for each loop may have been like way easier for them to read. And then there's some folks that might have more experience with the method chaining that you're doing here, and this might be easier for them to read. So always try to code like with the team that you have.
Yes.
If you're like the one guy on the team that's the David Pine type of developer, and the rest of the team likes to see for each loops, you might make some enemies by doing things against how the rest of the team views best practices. But with that said, if your team is up to date on the latest in C#9 and things like that, I prefer the method chains myself. If I'm coding by myself and I'm not live streaming, I try to keep things a little more in kind of like where I believe the median of developers lives. So I code a little more with those for each loops and things on live streams. If it's just me, I generally start a method or function expression with the fat arrow type expression, because for me, if I need to open that up into curly braces and start doing a lot of work, that leaves me open for breaking the single responsibility principle.
Yes.
Where that method is probably doing more than it should if I can't express it in a single line. Therefore, it could probably be broken down into several functions. So I try to default to the arrow just to kind of keep me in check. But that's something that I do, when I'm coding on a serious project and not something that I'm trying to teach to multiple levels of developer.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, the nested for each has made a lot more sense because I just had to go and look up what a tuple was. So
if you can go back for one more second, David.
Yeah.
I just want to explain out one more thing on that as well. So when we look at the statement, Alyssa, you're coming from a JavaScript background, so select might be a little foreign. So select in the context of C# is map in JavaScript.
JavaScript, yep.
So map is select. I don't know if map has an equal in JavaScript, but if you're using like JavaScript libraries like
I think there's flatten.
Yeah, it's flat or flat map.
Yeah.
So flat map would probably be I think underscore and what's the other underscore JS thingy? And
Lodash.
Lodash and underscore both have like a flat map function that does what select many does.
I think some of the native projections exist also now with within ECMAScript. I think they've standardized a lot of that. So I think flat map actually exists, and I think some of those other ones are there already.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, the terms that JavaScript uses are actually more common than the ones seen here in C#. So
Mm.
map and flat map are probably more industry standard than select and select many. But if you're looking at that statement and wondering what select and select many does, if you look at functional programming, and map and flat map is more the common term.
Well, you kept saying you were going to use link, but you never actually typed the word link.
So link is, it comes from the system.namespace link, and it allows you, so there's different types of links. So link stands for language integrated query.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you can write this using like native link, which is like, from and select and different keywords, but this is referred to as link chaining. So you essentially have, it works typically against like IEnumerable, so things that are of list type. So when we're casting this, we're getting an IEnumerable of card suits. So then we can have this extension method which selects from the IEnumerable. And IEnumerable is actually a really special type within C#. It allows for what's called deferred execution. So you can build out these expressions of how you want to map a collection of things. And it doesn't actually get iterated on until you either for each it or to list it or to array it. So it's a way to kind of express your intent before taking the actual performance cost of executing those actions. So that was a lot just for the card utilities. I got a bit more, so I'm going to kind of zip through here kind of quick. So there was some things I was curious about. So this is when I came in here, I would just do Control K, Control D, and that would format the file for me. Save that because it would look like JavaScript-esque or Java with the way the squiggly braces were. But I like that you have this iGame hub, and I know that that's being used within both the server and the client for kind of naming endpoints and functionality that way. I did have questions about some of these things. I don't think we need to get into that necessarily yet, so I'm just going to format and save that one. I'm going to come in here and remove these unnecessary usings, hit save on that. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to actually delete this file because it's not being used. This is the weather forecast that was hangover from the template. So now our shared library looks pretty good. I'm going to minimize that. I'm going to jump over on the server, and this is where things get really fun. So with C#9, they introduced the concept of top-level statements. And what that allows us to do is, first of all, anytime I have a template from the .NET tooling, I don't like their templates. And this is one of my strong opinions that comes through. First of all, as a developer, why does this need to be public? Why does this need to be public? Why does the main method need to be public? This doesn't need to be public. This doesn't need to be public. This certainly doesn't need to be public because the only thing that's calling it here is this main method. Likewise, this should really be returning tasks because they have run async available. And if they have run async available and we're not doing anything here, so we can actually get rid of that and call it directly from there. So we got rid of a method. We'll just chain those together since it's a minor little thing that we're doing. And since we're doing all of that, we can actually get rid of all of that boilerplate code holistically and say, await up here at the top level, get rid of those things. Whoops. Come on, it's trying to catch up to me. Remove unnecessary usings, and then it needs this using for the startup. So that's the server bits. Just reformat this real quick. Oh, where'd that go?
The only reasoning I can come up with that they have this in the templates the way they do is for some applications you need dependency injection before it's available in the application. And when you need that, you have to break this whole chain down back into the way it was when it came from the template. And you have to resolve dependency injection and do some extra work in there.
Well, yes and no. Yes and no, because they're actually wiring up a startup. So the startup's what manages all of that for you. So,
It does.
So startup here, within startup, and we're going to refactor this as well. Another thing, and this comes from the template also, and so there's a few things within here that are leftovers, and that's fine. But So you'll configure your services. This is, a first class citizen of .NET Core. They introduced this notion. It kind of borrowed from Owen Katana, but you configure services. So you're given an iService collection. This is representing your entire dependency injection, middleware, so to speak. And in here is where you configure and you'll add all of the different services for usage. And then at this point, the configure method, that's the first time you actually have the ability to, you can actually add things here and say, give me some special thing, your game hub or whatever it is. So at configure, that's when you can get additional things from dependency injection if needed.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what project I was working on where I needed this, but you actually need dependency injection before those steps occur. And you can access that in that program routine.
Okay.
It's a pretty long piece of code that you have to write, but it belongs up there, and you can't get it in there if it's in a single chain like that. But it's one of those one-off cases. It doesn't fit, every scenario. So
right.
I think just from the docs perspective, it may be there. So it's a little bit easier to explain when you need to add something there.
Sure.
That's my only, I'm just kind of trying to figure out a theory as to why it's worded the way it is.
Yeah. And there's lots of little things like that kind of get to me, instead of having that string constant. And I'm just going to freely start refactoring some of this stuff as I go and kind of talking through the reason I'm doing such. Before we had a string constant that came from the template, but it's just representing this octet, which is that string verbatim already kind of stored in a consistent place for usage from the media types. So let's use that instead. Let's get rid of the things that we're not using. So any unused usings. Another thing, Control KD. I typically get rid of their comments. They're not necessary. And this is just minor stuff. This isn't like earth shattering, but it just helps clean up your code a little bit. Press buttons.
Yeah, I just looked. So if you're initializing a database, that routine
Sure.
goes into create host builder before the run happens.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a spot where you have to resolve any of the services for talking to the database before you can initialize that database. So there are some cases where you need to butt into that chain and do some work, but you're right in that most of the time you can just simplify that whole thing.
Right. So let's see what we have here. These are echo messages, receive messages. Oh, this is the little chat hub. We can clean a few of these things up. Before on the show, I know we talked about, someone had said, can't you just express these as Lambda expressions? And the answer is yes. You can remove the async. Well, I'll show you both ways. You can actually remove the async await keywords if you want. Otherwise, you can still express it as a Lambda expression, but still leave the async await keywords. So you have the choice. But if you are expressing it, typically you can just remove them, and that's totally valid. Pine does love his top level statements. Yeah. All right. So that's that. Chat hub. Let's go look at this. There's not much in here I would need to change, or not that I need to change any of this, but this is, again, just all kind of, opinions coming through and just thinking out loud.
This is the main meat of the application, really. This is the game hub.
Right.
It's taking when the client starts the game and draws a card and discards a card. This is kind of handling all that logic. In the long run, we won't have enough time to do it on the show here today, but I think a lot of the logic could probably get pushed out into a model that controls some of the behavior instead of doing it all here.
Oh, that totally makes sense.
I think the hub in this case should do a little bit more of just being an arbiter between the two client states and the server state. And there should be some other type of controller, for lack of a better term, that handles all of the actual functionality, but we didn't get there.
Sure. Also, this is interesting. So deck is actually a stack. So we got this little bubble here, and I don't know if you can see this or not, but Visual Studio is pretty great at showing us little hints like that. So those 3 little dots, that's a suggestion underneath that underscore state.
Mm-hmm.
And if we hover over it, it actually says that use the count property instead of enumerable.count.
Ah, there we go.
So we can do that. But the nice thing is, yeah, the nice thing is we can choose to do that for that one-off case there. Otherwise, we can actually hit Control Dot, and we can do that for the entire document. So there's other places where that's actually been done. So it's going to apply it to these 2 lines where that was the same thing, where it was done in multiple places.
So count is a property method, and count with the parentheses is a link method. So it's doing a little bit more work on the link side versus just grabbing the property. So it's a little bit of an efficiency thing.
So that's fine. One other thing that I did do when I first came in here is I made the game state read only so that it's assigned from the constructor and that's it, so that we don't accidentally at some point in time later on down here just say, oh, we want to new up state, right? That way it prevents that from happening because it's read only. So you'd get a compile error there. And if we didn't have the read only, that would be possible, and that could mess up the entire state of the game, and you don't want to do that. So that's how many files did we touch so
Do you have
far?
any questions, Alyssa? I see you watching intently.
Just trying to soak it all up, man. Just trying to soak it all up.
All right, so that's the shared, that's the server. Let's jump into the client real quick and see what we can do in here. The client, there's not much opportunity except for, removing, and you see me doing this all over the place, remove unnecessary usings. They actually have the same capabilities, right? We can do that within this single file. You can actually do that for all occurrences within the document or the project or even the entire solution. So a lot of times I'll do like project if I'm in a single area like that, or even solution, depending on how aggressive I want to be with my refactoring. And what it does is just really cleans up all of those unnecessary usings. So all of these things that are kind of grayed out a little bit means that they're not being used. So there's no reason for them to be there.
Yeah, this is usually my go-to first line of refactoring is I do the reorder and remove. So it'll ABC order them, and it will remove any unused ones in the same process.
That's so cool.
All right, so let's see here. So I want to start looking at some of the pages and stuff like that. So when I was in here before, I noticed that index and table, both of these routes are both specifying that they're using this Microsoft ASP.NET Core SignalR client. So I'm going to remove that from both of those.
Get that into the imports.
Yep, move that into imports so that it's just wherever we need it.
Imports is underscore imports is like the global using statement space there.
Yep.
Something that we have in Razor Pages and Blazor.
Yeah, so what that really does is globally register all of these usings for all of our components within our project. So we can specify all the different usings that we want here rather than kind of putting them in piecemeal in other places.
Interesting side note too, if you can zoom in on your project stack on that side, is you can also take and put an imports.razor in like the pages folder, and you can scope down to just that folder as well. So it does obey like the namespace that it's in. So the one that's all the way at the top level goes for shared pages and any other folders that might be in the root. And then you can even go down further and drop one in any of those folders and just specify what's used in those folders, which is nice and handy.
Awesome. I actually didn't know that. So today I learned. So there is a few things that I would probably refactor. And this is, I don't know if we should we do this now or not, but so we've got this @code directive, and there's quite a bit going on here. So to keep it straightforward, I know that we did, I saw you do the refactor with the game component. You did that initially live on the show. I think it's worth calling attention to here. But before I do that, before I move those into a code behind file, I'm actually going to rename these because this is technically C#, so we should follow the same naming conventions that we do everywhere else. So we're just going to hit F2 and rename this to start with an underscore. And I'll typically prefix all private fields with an underscore. And a lot of people say, well, that's kind of old school, or, why do you do that?
Say the same thing.
The reason I do that, my single argument is that when I'm in the context of a class, if I'm down in a method and I'm working on it, imagine that this is some method. I want to discover what fields are available to me within the context of this class. So rather than saying this, which is 5 characters, including the dot, I can just say underscore, and that gives me all the stuff here in my scope very quickly. So it's like a discoverable thing for me. Like I prefer looking at it that way. And that's just a preference. I think there's different naming conventions that exist out there. There's rules, and adhere to whatever your team agrees on. If you're ever curious, though, there's actually an editor config. That .editor config is a Visual Studio. Well, I think it's actually recognized in VS Code and other IDEs as well. But what you can do is you can specify all of those rules for C# and .NET, HTML, Razor, Blazor, all those things, and you can share them as a team and make that part of your source control, so that other people coming into it will get those suggestions and refactoring tips for how to name things and follow all those rules. And you can do that on a per team or per project basis.
So do you remember the old practice of putting the type in the property name as well? Was
that referred to as Hungarian notation?
I guess so. I don't remember, but it was in like the VB6 days for me. So
yeah,
you had like a field that was an integer. It'd be like int foo instead of just foo.
Right.
And it was a bit redundant because the IDE handles all of that for us now. You can just kind of like hover over it and see it. But that's what the underscore reminds me of.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that was an older school thing, and I choose not to worry about that sort of thing. So let's bring these in. We can actually new this up like so. Let's see what else we want to do here.
It can be a one-liner.
Yep, it can. Oops. Async disposable. I don't think it'd be a one-liner. So this is another preference. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna be myself here and just say this is what I would do, and I would actually implement this explicitly this way to hide that from the instance itself. And just express it as a single line. Just says, hey, decorator pattern, this is walking up to our hub connection and disposing of it asynchronously. And that's just represented in this value task. And yeah, it's just a single line. So now we've officially implemented async disposable in this component. And we don't have to really do any other work. The only other changes I would do is I would make this questionable, just as a safety net. Since it's a value task, can't we do that? Can't we do that? Please, no. Why not? Async, do this, question mark, await. If we do await on unnullable value task, is that valid? Now I'm just making a fool of myself. Don't do that. Whatever I said, don't do that. Just undo the last couple seconds. We're gonna pretend that didn't happen. All right. Oh yeah, I don't have nullable context enabled and stuff like that. So there's a few other things that we could worry about. All right, so let's clean this up, and then our component, we can get rid of the code attribute. We can also get rid of these things here. We do need the injection of the navigation manager. We're going to put that right over here. Private inject this, make it public, get set. Press buttons, import that. Let's see how broken we are. This is supposed to be user input, isn't it? Oh, what's this one? That's the message input. All right, so our component looks a little bit better. The other thing is, while we're in here, let's do this. So I'm going to double down, hit class. I'm doing 2 at a time. button BTN, primary. We'll make the bottom one not primary though. This one can just be like info or something. This will give some of our buttons like the official Bootstrap styling. We've got one primary, one info. So this is like a tealish color. This is blue. That way they look a little bit better when we're in there from a user experience perspective. And then our table, we can do the same type of refactoring here where we're going to move the things out into a shadowed component type Blazor component. So let's just add another class here.
I have another stream to hop over to, but thank you for showing me what you have so far, David. Good luck to the rest of the refactoring.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Appreciate you coming on.
Bye.
Table Razor. So we're going to name that as such. We're going to jump over here, call it a partial. And a lot of people ask, well, why do we have to name it partial? Why does it have to be a partial? So with the Razor View Engine, what it's actually doing is when you have a table.razor file, it's compiling that behind the scenes and kind of hiding it away. So you're actually ending up with a table class that the View Engine's making for you on your behalf. So that's why you have to have a partial here. So you say public partial class table. So there's no name collisions. And then we're going to pull over these little bits, all of this fun stuff, copy, delete that one here, paste it in. And then the same type of thing here, async disposable. We're going to, oh, I didn't do the name refactor. I should have done that. Oh. Let's just do it here. Not a big deal. Players, hub connection has joined. Those are fine. Discard. Let's pull in this import. Just fixing all the little warnings from our refactoring here. There's a few things that we're missing. So pulling in some of the imports, pulling in references, renaming some of the fields. Discover or discard the deck count. Has joined game. We can actually make this, oh, this is private. Yeah, it's implicitly private. So let's just make that has joined game underscore. Okay, so we're looking pretty good so far.
Yeah, how do you feel about all those privates being typed out? I think they're unnecessary, so we can remove them because they're implied.
I get in trouble for that a lot. For me, I prefer to omit them if they're default. I just know the access modifiers by default, but again, that's a preference. It's a stylistic thing you could choose to do. I choose to typically omit them. But yeah, it's up to you. It doesn't hurt to be explicit. I guess that's a fair statement. Whoops. A lot of people prefer it. I think the official recommendation from Microsoft and the editor config from the team in the runtime repo that they share for people to consume and follow their pattern and styles is to be explicit with that. So again, that's just a preference. Let's see here. So I'm going to do explicit because I prefer to do it that way. Make this a single line. Right. So now we're getting quite a bit cleaned up here. Let's see if we got players. We do. Players has been correctly refactored and named. We can get rid of these two things. We do need the navigation manager though. We're going to pull that in. So one thing, we could have left that inject the navigation manager into the other component, but we can also just pull it in here properly rather than doing that. I think it's better for visibility since it's being used in this visible class to us rather than the alternative, which was buried in the component markup. All right, so we have those things. Let's just make sure now that we've changed a lot of things, let's just make sure it compiles still. Make sure that we didn't break anything. The moment of truth. Wait for it. It's trying. It's doing something. What's it doing? Still compiling. It's slower when we stare at it, apparently. Minimize these things. client game state. We're going to go over there real quick. We're just kind of navigating around a bit while it's doing its thing. All right, everything's built, everything's compiled. Control K, Control D to reformat that. We do have some components. I'm going to jump into the playing card component real quick because there's one thing I wanted to change in here. So we have this CSS face down. I'm going to enclose that real quick. And then I'm going to add another little thing here. But first, before I do, we're going to say string CSS suit, and that's expressed as our card.suit.toString.toLower. So I'm going to take the suit and make it lowercase and append that up here actually as our suit CSS. And the reason I'm going to do that is so that we can say we want to have our playing card be stylized as hearts or diamonds in red. So let's just do hearts, comma, this, diamonds, and then make that color red, right? Because hearts and diamonds, those are red in color. So let's just save that. And let's go back over to our components a little bit more. There's some buttons. I'm going to add some different styles here to the buttons as well. Class, button, BTN, make this a primary. Just copy this over real quick. Making sure that all of these things kind of look really decent for our user interface. We're going to say draw is danger. That's dangerous.
You're lucky Chris DeMars is not here right now.
I know, yeah, the bootstrap stuff, it would drive him nuts, right? He would not be happy. All right, let's just, we've done a lot here. Let's just.
I'm all for like leveraging things that I have available already, and then if I need to go back and customize, that's the time to do it. But prototype time, give me prototyping tools. I am all about prototyping in the browser. Like get that proof of concept built, and then worry about taking Bootstrap out later.
Absolutely. We're going to fix a few more things here. Some of the naming conventions. Make sure that the component's marked up correctly. Wait for my statement completion to catch up. State, nude that up. Naming violation there, naming violation there. Come on. Refactoring all sorts of stuff. Let's go. Click, underscore, hub connection. All right. Oh, this can be a simple little ternary expression.
Exactly.
And then that can actually be.
I love how Visual Studio does that.
Yeah, the
Control
tool
period twice, and you've gone from like 8 statements to 1.
Yeah, the tooling has really come a long way. I'm super happy with it. I remember, for me, I was a huge advocate years ago of JetBrains and ReSharper, and I would use that religiously. And I think that the Visual Studio tooling itself has kind of caught up to a lot of those advantages. I was going to ask a question here real quick in looking at some of the stuff. So we've got a task called Start Game. Walks up to and sends Start Game. Did you not pull in that iGame Hub to use the name of stuff?
I think that we started doing that later.
Okay.
So this is kind of legacy versus the other file that you've looked at.
We could do technically. There is no start game, is there? Okay.
I think
That's okay. Well, I mean, what we can do is we can just name it ourselves, which is start game. That's what it was doing anyways.
Yeah.
That's right there.
You have to look at, well, that works too. But I was going to say, you have to look at the other file. So this is which one? This is a little blurry on my screen still.
There was the iGame Hub. But this is kind of signified some of the things that the Game Hub was actually calling out. So if we go back over there, iGame Hub, that's those named methods.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's other methods that are on here that aren't named, right? So this start game is basically an endpoint on our SignalR hub that we can call. and we can invoke, and it does this action. So that's not actually called out in our interface, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And this gets back to that point that you had with Brady.
Table.razor. I just wanted to see what we were doing in there, because there were some places we were using. Okay, so you can use it on the hub connection on.
Ah, yes, for the
it,
events.
Yeah.
Okay. But you didn't specify it for like named methods of things that are kind of invocable.
So you see send async table join game is still a magic string.
So that's actually a good probably design pattern then, because this is something I haven't really given much thought to, but now that I look at it, it would probably be a good idea for that shared library to signify two different contracts. One is the on, right? Mm-hmm. So I chat hub on, like your event library, what all the different things that can happen, and then kind of the contracts for what those are going to be. And then the other one would be like the invocable. So I don't know, game hub invocables or something, right? To, you know, or endpoints or whatever, something that you can call into, and, you know, the parameters that you would pass there. So just kind of separating those, because those are very important. One's you're calling into from the client, the other one's you're subscribing from the client and receiving from the server. So it's different mindsets. But that's cool. So let's see. We have done a lot of stuff. I'm just going to run it real quick just to make sure that our cards load up, what they look like. Let's make sure that I didn't break the world, because I think I touched a lot of files here. And I know it compiles, but does it run? And if it runs, does it run correctly?
So here's an issue I've been having. I hope this doesn't happen to you, but Visual Studio's been hanging in throwing, just it'll like reboot instead of doing what it's supposed to do.
I haven't seen that. I was going to ask you, actually, I just learned about this last night. I gave a talk for a user group, for the Chicago.net user group, and Scott Addy was on, and he had shared that there's some preview features within Visual Studio where you can opt into using the Razor preview view engine for the IDE. And I'm curious if you have that toggled on or off.
I have to check again. I did a repair install, so I don't know if it's still enabled or not.
Okay.
But yeah, that's something I need to look at again. I thought that was included with the .NET 5 release by default. I may be incorrect, but I thought that was turned on after .NET 5 shipped. So it was in preview. You had to opt into it, and then I just, something tells me it's now the normal. So we've got a chat hub still.
And you notice some of some of the styles are a little bit different.
Started.
Wait for it.
I think we need to add some workflows and stuff to this game, and it would be really cool.
All right, so let's join the game. Let's start it. Notice the colors of the buttons, they're stylized slightly differently. Ta-da, we got red now.
Yes.
We've got black. So kings, 3s, 7s. Sweet. Ace of hearts. So I'm not really familiar with how you were doing this before. Oh. So let's see if I separate. The idea is to
have game logic yet. So what you can do right now is you can draw a card and you can discard a card, and it's all based on what do you call it? The honor system that you're playing the game correctly. So
where is discard pile? That's discarded. So where's like the starting of the game, like the next card that is playable? Because isn't there supposed to be one that's like down here that would be like, here, you know, either play a 7 or.
So you have your hand. If you scroll up, hit play.
Play.
And there you've got your ace went on the discard. So in Crazy8s, it's like Uno. So Crazy8s is like the precursor to Uno before it was like branded and features were added to it. So this is like an old school game you can play with a regular deck of cards, but instead of having the Uno colors, it's you have to play the same suit.
So I have to have a hearts.
You would have to have a heart, or you'd have to draw until you receive a heart. There you go. So then you'd play the heart, and then the next person would have a turn, and they would have to play you could also play a 3. Play the same number or the same suit, and you'd keep doing that. And also 8s are wild. That's why it's called Crazy 8s.
Got it.
So in any circumstance, you can play 8, and then when you're out of cards, you win. The other person has to count up the number of cards in their hand. They all have a value, and at the end of the game, the highest score after so many hands loses.
So I've just won. I just basically won the game.
So the idea of Crazy 8s was to get the highest point value cards out of your hand the soonest. So if the other person goes out, you don't get trapped with a bunch of expensive cards in your hand.
Right.
It's actually a really fun game. Very simple. You can just pick up a regular deck of cards and play it.
Well, let's go back in here now. And since we have some of the stuff, we've done some of the general refactoring. Let's, I'm going to open up the command line real quick here. I'm going to do a clear. I'm going to zoom in a bit so people can see this on stream. So this is my GitHub or Get CLI, and I'm just going to do a few things. Get B. This is refactor Crazy8s. We've got a new branch. I have some aliases that I set up too. So if there's commands here that are unfamiliar to others, I could share my aliases after the show. So I have a get save where I can actually let's do get status. Get status first. See all the stuff that we changed.
And I'm gonna jam the link for that theme you're using into chat.
Cool.
So
save.
people can grab that as well.
Initial refactoring effort. Save that.
The GitHub link and share that in chat while you're working.
So I saved all of those local. Actually, we can make that read only. I saved all of those local changes. So those are all in a branch called Refactoring Crazy8s. And now we're going to go back to some of our shared bits, and this is where we're going to start trying to explore record types. So we have this class that is a card, and it just takes a card value and a card suit, and that's great. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove well, let's see how I would do this. So we're going to, first of all, we're going to name it, instead of a class, we're going to name it record. And then we're going to move all this stuff up. So I'm going to select from that property, pound that out, get rid of the get sets, because those aren't needed right there. That can stay true. Ta-da, whoops, that goes away. And this gets defined like that, this like that. Do Control K, Control D. Okay, so now we have a record type. So basically the refactoring is removing the class name, naming that record, and then essentially what was kind of the constructor before is now the property values, and that's been moved up to essentially where the record is defined itself. So you've got public record card, open parenthesis, card suit, card value, bool is face down. We're going to default it to true because that's the way it was. And then you can still override things here like toString, which we refactored to be an expression of value of suit. So that's perfectly fine and dandy. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just recompile this real quick to make sure we didn't break anything. So when you're refactoring types, one of the key advices I have is recompile often, because this type flows through a lot of our system. It's one of the main types being used. So the way that it's being used is determined by the type. So here we go. We can't convert. Let's see.
Yeah, this will break things.
It's going to break things, and that's okay. Cannot convert from card value to card suit. Oh, okay. So the order is important. This is a positional record. Value was first in our original constructor. So we need to make sure that that's there so that anything that had that constructor usage before that was newing up an instance of a card, they were passing in value initially and then suit. So that's important.
There's some good practices in naming things right here too. The reason that value comes before suit is this is usually the way we talk about a hand of cards. So we have a card which is like an ace of spades. So it is the value of suit, and our 2-string also mimics that. So you don't go to new up a card and you type it in backwards and you get errors and problems. So
right. All right. So now build succeeded. So everything successful. That was really, really straightforward. That was super easy. So let's do the next one here. Card value. That's an enum. Same thing with card suit. So those are good. So there's not much value in, we actually can't turn those into records. Are there any other types that we could consider doing that with? I don't think so. Let's see how this game state. We could consider doing that with game state. I think I would change this, refactor that a little bit. I'm just kind of looking over some of the stuff here. So we have a player and we have a game state. Let me look back over here on the client too real quick. Playing card. So there's a few things I want to refactor here. But before we jump into that, I have to take a bio break real quick. So give me 3 minutes.
all right.
I'm going to turn off my screen
Sounds good. Let me
and be right back in like 3 minutes.
all right. So while David takes a quick break, let's take a look at some of the things that we might be working on today. Let's see. I've got a Visual Studio instance that refuses to close. So pardon while I fix that really fast. I don't have the latest bits that he's looking at, but one of the things that I'll ask David about, there we go. Now I've got a screen I can share. One of the things I want to ask David about when he comes back, we're going to refactor out the record type of card, and it's a great candidate because it should be immutable, and records are by default immutable objects. So they're designed to not be the properties aren't going to be set without creating a brand new copy of that object. So they're immutable by design. But there's some things that we're doing in here that when I created this project, we were moving pretty quickly. I'm trying to remember if it's in the game hub. I believe it is, or it's in the state actually. So I, by just habit, I use lists a lot. So let me grab my zoom tool here. Trying to make sure I can zoom in well. Zoom it. There we go. I use lists a lot just by habit, and we might be able to get some time with David to look at this, but there's a lot of instances where we look for a player by ID in this code. So if I have my game state, I have a list of players, and then we're doing a lot of, where is it here? This right here. So we say player select, and then we go in and find it by ID. Ideally, that would be a hash set, and we would just be able to grab the player like this, where the ID would be right there. And we could just pull that record out of that list without having to use link to find it. So that might be something that David can help us with as well. And let me check here. I've got David back. David is here again.
Hi, friends.
So let's see. There. Nope, that's my screen. There's your screen. There we go. So David's back. I don't know if you caught any of the little overview I was giving, but I was just kind of pointing out some places we might be able to do some work here before the end of the show.
So we were talking about hash sets and mutability and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to see where those opportunities were. Where did you pull those up? Was that inside the client game state or?
So the game state has the definitions for what a player is and what a game is.
Okay, yep,
So
I see
that
that.
might be a quick refactor too, is just to push those out into their own files. So player ended up in there just because we were trying to do it very quickly. And we were looking at the game state and how it related to a player when we wrote this. So
Sure, yeah.
we were in the state and we're like, well, players was just a string. Now it's a whole type. So we just moved down and started typing it out, but never moved it to a file.
So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move player to, I'm going to do two things. So I'm going to click on this, and there's a refactoring that actually says move type to player.cs, and it's going to move that player type to our hubs folder. I'm going to drop, I'm going to go into player real quick. I'm going to drop hubs from the name, and I'm going to space that, and I'm going to call it .shared, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to save that, and I'm going to grab it and throw it into our shared directory, our shared project. So now player's there, so we can delete it from here. We don't need it there because it really belongs in our shared model. So we have a player in both spots. It can be shared. So if we go back real quick to game state, it's calling into that. Why is, oh yeah, because
using statement back.
No, shared. I had server shared. It's not server, it's just shared.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So now it should find it and it should be happy. So we list of players, and then go back to player itself. Player can actually become, this can be a record. We can get rid of this. So we can name, yeah.
Now, how will the hand behave if it's a record? Can we still add and remove cards from a hand even if it's a record?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's positional records, and then there's just non-positional records. So you get the same. So if we just literally name it record rather than class, instead of having like the open parens up there by the player definition, like the name of the type, this is still a record.
So it is mutable at this point.
It is right. Yes. Okay. So when we're doing this up, we're saying set. We don't actually want to say that set there. We could say init, or we could just get rid of that and say no set at all. And then we are newing it up, and then you have a reference to that. But then we can name this hash set. And since card is a record, we get those value comparison semantics. So now that we have this being a hash set, it basically takes the hash code of this record type. So then the value, there's three things in there. The card value has this card value, the card suit, and whether or not it's face up or face down.
Okay. When the game initializes here, it sends the player a full hand.
Okay.
Is that going to cause an issue with the setter being removed?
We can do init then. So init is a special new keyword that lets you only assign to hand when the object is being initialized.
Okay.
So that's using the object initializer syntax. So like new player, open squiggly, hand equals the thing.
Okay. We'll have to try it and see. I think the player is initialized with an empty hand, and then the hand is dealt after the game starts.
So let's just compile real quick and see if this refactor broke anything. And the other thing is we can make this init as well, actually.
Yeah, the name and ID, those definitely don't change. The hand, however, I believe gets set one time. Depends on how it's set as well. You could circumvent that by newing the hand up, and instead of setting hand, say player.hand equals the new hand, you could say player.hand. What's the method I'm looking for? Add range.
Right.
Add range would circumvent like replacing the entire hand. It would just add all of the cards to it.
So we have a game hub task here that says add hand. And what was this doing? This was walking up to the clients saying group. So state players, select player, clients, group, the player ID, which is the string name for the player, and then add hand. So add hand given the player hand. I'm going to think about this for a second. So it's saying that this is a hash set, but it needs to be a list. So what is player hand? Player hand's the thing that we just changed into a hash set. So, add hand is expecting a list. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to say add hand could be, I think, iList, because I think a hash set implements that, but we'll verify in just
so too. If it's not iList, it's iCollection.
Yeah, I'm just going to dive into this real quick. So if you go into the type, like hash set, you can hold control and click into it. Click, come on, wait for it. I did it, I promise. Click. Don't forget.
I know this works.
It works. It works eventually. It works when no one else is watching. So it's navigating to the definition. And what this does is it actually decompiles the hash set, and it shows you, so I collection, I enumerable of T, I read only collection. Is that it? What else is over here? I set, I read only set, ID serial. It does lots of things, right? Let's just do I collection. I think that's going to be, to your point, the desired.
I collection or I enumerable would probably work there.
I collection. Save. I don't know why syntax highlighting isn't decorating that correctly. So let's go look. So that's a hub action, right? So there's on the game hub. That's just calling back into it. So where does that actually call? So here's find. Okay, so here's where things get fun.
This could probably be cleaned up quite a bit.
Yeah, so all right, so we've got our game state. This is our game hub. So there's a few things that we have changed. So this is the init only. So that doesn't break player. Player still works just perfectly fine there. We're not using player. Oh, we're using it there. Okay, that's good. Table. Just kind of looking at everything here. Dollar table. We don't need dollar, right? It can just be table.
Yeah, it was at one point a string interpolated value.
Got it. Start game, player hand. So add still works. That's fine.
You could also, if you wanted to get rid of a for each here, I think you could do a range operation. I'm trying to think how that would look, but I'm pretty sure you can.
So where you're saying like state.players.select enumerable.range, whatever the 0 to 4 or whatever it is, and then loop through and add them that way.
Yeah, I think you could do that as well.
We could. That's something. Let's see. To consider.
Yeah, you could probably write a range and a select in there and eliminate both of the for and the for each.
Yep. And if players is actually a list, since players is a list, actually, the list type and only the list type has an extension method for each. You could do it that way too.
Yeah. See a lot of people caution against that one, just in case you're mutating the objects in the list.
Yep.
So people just try to stay away from it completely. So I'll just throw that out there. So you don't see it too often.
So this is calling into, I'm getting confused on myself. So this is calling add hand, and that's coming back into here somewhere, right? Or no? That's just notifying people that a hand has been added. So people can subscribe to that. So back over here, we'll have the hand index, not an index, right? Is it table? Oh, no, it's the game. It's the game. So here in the game, we're going to have, where is it? Add hand. So this type right here needs to change. So add hand. Hand is a list, but right here it's actually,
So I'm checking my levels, folks. I see some comments about my microphone, and I'm not seeing that.
I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything on my system that it shows me as maxed out.
Well, I can hear you just fine. Hash set. So I'm changing a few things here about this. I made this also the client game state. I made that be a hash set as well. And we're just assigning to it from what was given from the server, which is fine. Change this real quick to be a name of other little refactoring.
Let me know, guys, if that changed anything. I don't have any other controls that I can really tweak here, other than turning up the gain on this mic, and then you're gonna hear
everything,
like fans blowing, and yeah.
Cool. So now we're going to do a couple little things here. Now that we have a hash set and we get those value comparison semantics, we can clean up some of the stuff. So some of the things that we can do is we can say, now that we're given a card, so discard played. So I'm assuming this method is discarding a card that has been played, right? So we're going to say that one's null. And then we're going to say what we were trying to do before is we were trying to find it from the hand, state, hand, find. So let's just do state dot hand dot try get value, no, remove where we were removing it, right? Yes,
discard it. The null pulls it out of
so we're just removing
selected card. And then we need to find it in the hand. The reason we had to find it in the hand is because the card we're being passed is, while the values are the same, is not the same instance. So if you do card.remove, it's going to equate it by instance, and it won't remove anything.
But now it will.
Because the records.
Because of records and value semantics and.
Are they?
It doesn't need to be the same instance. It just needs to be the same value set for that card.
Okay.
But that should work. And how can we test that real quick? If we just. Do you know where this gets played or this happens?
If you go in, start up the app, and then add a player, start the game, and discard a card. If it does not remove that card from your hand, then you'll know it was broken.
We broke something. We broke it. Broke it. We broke it. Yay.
Yeah, and you've gone full robot mode for some reason.
Robot? Like my audio?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Should I jump off and jump back on?
Yeah, see if that helps real quick.
All right.
There we go. So, I've tried to fix my audio, and for some reason David's gave out. So he went full Mr. Roboto on us. So he'll be right back. I sound normal now. I tweaked my gain a little bit and put on some noise suppression, so it helps level everything out a little bit. So let's see if David rejoins us here momentarily. I don't see him coming back into the streams. Let me double check and make sure. Oh, there he is. There he is. All right. We've got David back. David, are you robot?
Does it work still? Is it bad? Is it good?
You're good. I don't hear the robot voice anymore.
All right.
Did you have to change your batteries? Is that what it was?
Yeah. David Pine 6 was trying to intrude. All right. Let me try building this again.
We need a screen, my friend.
Oh, yeah. Share screen. So many things. All the moving parts.
Live streaming breaks all the time. There we go. Got your screen back.
Cool. It's compiling. It's running. I had to clean this up real quick. So there was that same type of find logic existed here where you were trying to find the player. And once you had the player, then you had to find their hand and you had to find the card in the hand and then try to remove it. Instead, now we can just do player.hand.remove given the card. And so they got two different things that have been changed. We're removing them based on value semantics for the hash set usage in both places. So if we go to table and then we hit game, this is going to open up over here. Throw this on this side. Click this one.
I need to find a kata or something that has a bunch of the different lists types in it or collection types in it, because I need to break the habit of everything is a list.
David, we're going to join. We're going to start the game. Cool, 5
Select
cards.
select and discard and see.
Let's actually find a diamonds then. Selected the 10 of diamonds. We're going to play it. I have a breakpoint here. Hand. It's got my hand, which is where's the values? They're in buckets. All right, so we're going to remove. Let's just let it fly.
Yeah, it was diamonds.
So 4 cards.
And, okay, good. It's gone.
It's gone. It worked. And
so it worked. It
this
found
updated.
the right card.
So if I draw, that works
5.
there. 5. Draw again. 10. We can play the 10. Comes in here. Let's remove that breakpoint. Let it fly.
Yeah, it looks like
5.
it's working to me.
Cool. Yeah, that's working beautifully.
So
close.
now we can get rid of a lot of the find logic in there.
Mm-hmm.
So the ones on the client state are gone.
Yep, I changed that into a hash set as well. So now let's go back to game. Let's see. Let's just kind of peruse through all of this real quick. So, a few little optimizations here. Some of these can be marked as read only. Not this one because we're binding to it, but this one here for sure. That can be read only. And I'd probably refactor a few of these things out, but let's just do that real quick. Otherwise, it's going to bug me. All right, don't need that. That's fine. Inject. So I typically do fields before anything else, and then I typically do attribute-based properties, and then I do like non-attribute-based properties. That's just kind of a...
Mr. Magoo, we will get to some UI stuff probably on another show. So we're going to redo the whole like UI completely. This is like prototype land still, so we'll throw some better looking card graphics, maybe something like this David's got here. We also don't select the card, like physically you don't see like an outline or anything around it, which I think would be better than just listing the name out, but we were trying to just get it done.
Yeah, definitely. The irony to that is that I looked at the UI too, and I was like, ooh, there's some cool opportunities here. So I just did some real quick Googling, and Don Park put together this github.io, which is basically scalable CSS playing cards available on GitHub. I'll share a link here in private chat. You can share it out. But this is, like I said, 8 years ago, they put this together, and it's beautiful. It looks just like actual playing cards. It's scalable. And it's got the back of the card, which is kind of a pretty back of the card, and it's got the flip capabilities and whatnot. I was thinking that if you could pull this in, this would be a great kind of addition to the user experience.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
All right, so minimize that. That's cleaned up a bit. So we were looking for, if you remind me real quick, opportunities to remove concerns. Let's see here. What else? Index, any of the hash set find stuff, right? That's all fine. Table, that's all fine.
Yeah, the other place you'd see that is on the hub.
The hub itself. Okay, let's go back to the game hub. Players, we made players, if I recall correctly, we made that a record as well, didn't we?
Yes.
We did. So you get value semantic comparison all the way down. So a player with the name of David that has a GUID that is the same GUID string representation and a hash set of those cards. We've already proved that works. Those can be compared by values and matched.
So we are sending back from the client just the ID.
Okay. So the player ID. So this still needs to exist because the players is a list of players, and that's fine. I mean, if you're happy with that.
Can we, if players was a hash set, instead of having to find it, couldn't we do player open bracket past the ID that way?
So say that again.
Let me see. Let me post it in chat. Maybe you'll get the idea what we're doing here. I'll put it in a private chat.
Are you saying by like index? Like
yes. Instead of having to go find it, wouldn't that work? That's part of hash set, isn't it?
Well, we didn't make it a hash set.
No, but we could.
I'm not sure if that indexes it that way. Let's try it real quick. Hash set. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? We could break everything, and then it's your fault.
I'm grabbing the docs here on my screen just to double check.
Yeah, it doesn't have an indexer that way.
Okay.
But we could make.
Maybe it's dictionary. Is it
Yeah,
dictionary?
we can make it a dictionary type.
Let's make it a dictionary. Then we get that capability because we're using that a lot. And there should ideally only be one player with that ID. It's a unique ID, so a dictionary is perfect here because it's a key and a value.
So are you using a GUID or are you using
Yes.
a string? And is that consistent throughout the app?
It is a GUID.
Okay. So
I'm
then
trying to think if it's represented as a string anywhere. I don't think it is. Yeah, see, I need to take myself back to school on all of the collection types again. It took me a second to remember which one it was.
Players, that player. So last discarded, that's the card to discard, remove. Okay.
So, Mr. Bagoo, this is the SignalR. So you're looking for the Blazor and UI shows.
Typical C# devs, mate. Yeah, I mean, you have to have something functional before you can, and optimized, right? Before you can do all that.
We'll pull this into some Blazor streams later this, up and coming weeks and months here, and we'll do like some UI where we can like sort or hand and drag and drop cards and do all that Blazor-y stuff. But for the segment that we planned for the sessions you're seeing, they were SignalR. So we were trying to get SignalR ideas and work with the SignalR hubs and communicate with the client in Blazor without using JavaScript and that sort of thing.
There was one important refactor here. So when we walk up to states and we say players.select, now we're selecting into the dictionary. So these are really key value pairs. So I call them KVP. As an abbreviation. So then we'll have the key, which is our GUID, and the value, which represents our player instance. So therefore, we have our hand. Can we make this? Yeah, we can stack this like this, right? Okay. The other thing is we've got players here. Oh, so here's another little nicety. Since this is, and we haven't refactored it yet, when we were iterating through the list of players before, there's a nice thing that a lot of people are not familiar with. They actually added a default destructor for key value pair types. So you can say this is the ID and this is the player now. So we're basically iterating through this dictionary as a key value pair. So this is the ID, this is the player, but this is represented as a deconstructed tuple. So we have this tuple that identifies these things. The ID is the GUID, the player is the player instance, and now this for each loop works just as it did before. One other thing here, so players add. What we're going to do is we're going to do players.
And when you get done with this, you can go back down to that the deconstructor.
Yep. Player ID. So we're going to say the player's player ID equals the player instance, and this is how you'll add things to a dictionary. All right, so, yep.
Since we're not using ID here, what most functional developers would do is throw an underscore in there to signify that it's just tossed away.
Yep, discard. Should we go about refactoring this now too, you think? Should we try that?
Sure, let's take a stab at it.
So let's just say, what I'm going to do is typically whenever I'll refactor something that's iterative like this, you'll notice when we first started the stream, there was those nested for each loops. I did the same type of thing where I'll comment that out and I'll have it rather than deleting it, so I can use it as a mental model to refer back to. So if ever we're looking at something like that, it's a little bit easier to kind of approach. So we're going to say select, and then again, we're going to have our key value pair, and that's expressed as this little doodad. So let's just see what we've got here. So now we wanted to do enumerable dot range, And the start value was 0, right?
Yes.
And a count of 4. Is that right?
We want
4,
5 cards. So
5
that
cards.
gives us 5.
So a count of 5. And then we're going to... Well, we're not really selecting anything, though, because we're not... yeah, let me think about that real quick. So we could select from that range. Again, we'll do an underscore here because that's our int, that's our index from the thing that we're iterating over. We're going to select into the state dot deck dot pop, which will just on our stack pull off the next thing. So this actually needs to be, that's for each player though, right? Oh, so yeah, so each player hand. So hand. All right, so let me just grab this real quick. So our key, so we have.
Yeah, this is something that I wanted to get into at some point. This is
Player.
a really good question here. So this isn't a true deal. This is I need to get this done by the end of the stream deal. So it takes 5 cards off the top of the deck and hands them to a player, which is not the true way a dealer would deal cards.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So likely this will be rewritten again anyway.
Player dot hand. Is there an add range? No, there's not. So we would just do this dot select. Well, we can just do player dot hand. I'm not sure I like this any better.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. It's doing a lot of mutating inside of a select, which I don't like.
Yeah, it's not as before what we were doing when we refactored those nested for each loops. It was really just building something out and returning it, so it had finite control of the entire thing. Whereas this is more or less
It's
adjusting
manipulating
state. Yeah, it's different. So I'm not sure I like that either.
Plus, as our the real Dave, hey, he's the real Dave. He pointed out this is not a good deal algorithm, so
Yeah.
it needs to be fixed anyway. So instead of to do deal deal correctly.
So I'm curious though. Let's double click into that real quick. So a real deal would be like not 5 cards from the top. Is it like each player gets one?
Yeah, it's like round robin.
Robin.
Yep.
Well, can't we fix that?
Sure. If you want to fix that instead.
Let's think about that real quick. So we'll have to iterate the players. So how would we do that? So it's really, let's write some pseudocode real quick. So for, what is it? So for the number of players, right? Number of players, they each get 5 cards.
Mm-hmm.
And you said it's round robin.
Yep.
So I'm trying to think here. 5 cards. So really the dealer looks at a card deck. They have the card. So they're just going to start popping cards off. So they need to have the count. So we need to have
be able to reverse this statement here. Instead of saying for each player, do 4, take the 4, move it up around the 4 each. So it does 5 times for each player, give them a card. I think that's all we need to do.
Let's see.
You literally just move that 4 piece and swap it with the 4 each, right?
Well, that's...
So whatever you do in here will repeat 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
So if you iterate over each player 5 times and give them 1 card, it's the same as what we had, but correct dealing. I think that's right.
Oops, come on. So this will happen 5 times.
Mm-hmm. For each player, we give them 1 card.
So doesn't this need to happen more? Because this will only happen 5 times. So
We give each player 1 card 5 times. It's the same as giving each player 5 cards 1 time. Right?
I guess let's just run it and see
Just
what happens.
the order of operations gets switched around. So it's a proper deal versus giving the top 5 cards off the deck.
Let's run it. We're running it. We're going to test it out. We're going to see if we broke the world. I'd like to say that we're covering a lot of ground. Get status. Get
Yeah,
save.
I like that we're using some proper collections.
Get save.
Like I said, all the stuff that we were doing on the stream was like bad habit because it's prototyping mode and you're going a million miles an hour trying to just get it in working condition. And then you can take kind of a retrospective look and go, oh, I probably should have used a hash and a record and some of the other more robust types that are in the system. And since we have a lot of UI folks in here, I keep comparing it to Divitis. Like, we do that with HTML all the time. It's like, yeah, this could have been a list item, not a div. This could have been, I think I threw like definition list out there at Alyssa one day, and she was like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, what are you talking about? It's like, we got to get away from divs, folks. Not everything's a div.
Oh, that's funny.
Everybody always forgets the definition list. Good old
All right.
definition list.
So that worked. I got 5 cards.
Yeah, that's all that mattered. And it does it in the correct order now. So it's not just a spamming of the top 5 cards of the deck.
Mission
accomplished. That was just me in a rush again. So if I would have just thought about it for 5 seconds and flipped the logic around, it would have done it the right way the first time.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, hey, it's working. We've refactored a ton of it. I pushed it up to GitHub real quick, and I think what I should do now is, I mean, how much time we got? We got 15 minutes left of our 2-hour stream, so maybe we should look at getting this merged in and pull requests going. And
let's do it. So Dave's going to merge his pull request. I shared the link one time. I will share it again, but it's on my personal account for legal reasons. We don't putting things on our Telerik GitHub is a little more of a little bit more red tape than me just shoving stuff into my own personal account. So I put it there, and we'll drop that into chat. And Dave's pushing the merge or the pull request now.
Well, before I do that, let's just zoom in and kind of walk through this flow real quick. So I pushed to my fork. So I have a fork, and GitHub lets us have forks in different repositories. So I forked his bits. I pulled them down locally. I worked with them. I created a branch called Refactor Crazy8s. And I've been kind of incrementally refactoring these pieces, testing them out, making sure that they work, making sure that all of my things are functioning. I fixed the broken unit test. I did all those things. So now I'm going to add a little note here. I'm going to create the pull request. But before I do that, typically what I like to do is I like to just kind of review all the changes to make sure they make sense. Sometimes there's things that you'll do that you'll forget about. And this is a great interface to kind of leverage some of that refactoring fun time. So like here's like this extra line, like probably should have deleted that. Not necessarily a huge problem right now, but not the end of the world either. So
I do like you added distinct to the assertion there.
Yeah,
that's actually very important.
Especially because we made it a record type. So now what that lets us do is ensure that we get 52 distinct cards and we get the value semantic comparison. So we're guaranteeing that those are unique values and suits.
Yeah. Asserting that we had 52 cards didn't necessarily pass the test. You could have a false positive really easy. So distinct is a nice add.
So we added CSS for the suit. That's how we get the coloration of the cards in there. And that's just expressed as a card suit 2-string 2 lower. We have corresponding CSS for that.
I have a nice refactoring tool that will take those 2 lines completely out as well.
What? These things?
Yep. Yeah, I'll have to show you at another time, but it's there's a little utility that I published for Blazor that handles CSS values like this. So it'd basically be one line that has the entirety of the CSS that should be represented there, and it has an API wrapped around it that says the CSS is applied when, and then you put in a Boolean or a function that returns a Boolean value,
Yeah.
and it will build the proper CSS, and
Oh.
it's a one-line like chainable API.
That's awesome. That's cool. So we got rid of our Java-esque type formatting, and we added a hash set. We used count instead of count the method call. We have a little space there between the cards and the semicolon. We used preferred naming. We've encapsulated some of our stuff in code behind, so shadowed componentries with Blazor. We added some of the CSS for the buttons so that they look a little bit more appealing. We got rid of some unnecessary usings. We are now looking at the kind of refactoring the game. So we had some properties that were mismatched around. So now we have a little bit more easier to read flow. So now we've got all of our private variables defined here as fields at the top. Then we've got our attribute-based properties, and then we have just our other properties. We're able to now do just remove, since we get those value semantic comparisons with our record types rather than doing this logic of finding them.
So much better.
Yeah, it makes it simpler. We have ternary based expression bodied members here. So
look at that code block that was deleted.
Yeah, negative lines of code, always a good thing. And we've actually added some lines here for readability. So, some of the stuff's kind of on a new line when it doesn't need to be. It was a single line before. That's okay, because we end up with less lines of code holistically. So it's not a big deal. And then our index, the same thing with naming, with adding some of the CSS styles. We were able to remove that @code directive. So now our markup is 25 lines rather than 65 lines. And now we do have a shadowed component here. So this is a proper partial C# class. So that's available there. Same thing with table, remove some of the inject and implements, and using the usings were in two places. We moved them to the imports. Again, @directive moved into our component, which is pretty straightforward, using C#9 implicit target type new, so we can say new of that string. If we were going to use, I'm going to show this real quick. If we were going to define that dictionary right here, if this was a string, there was one really cool thing, and you had alluded to this before. If that was a string, you could actually pass in the string comparer .ordinal.ignore case. Again, if that was a string though. And the reason you could have done that is because that's one of the available constructors for string type dictionaries, where the key is a string. So that's another little neat kind of implicit type new situations. I'm going to minimize or undo all that. I just wanted to share that real quick because I thought that's pretty neat. So yeah, the components all done. That's pretty straightforward. Cleaned up a lot of the program CS there. So some of those unnecessary usings. We added the SignalR client to our import, so that's available everywhere. In our CSS, we added pcard.hearts, pcard.diamonds, and signify those as red. And again, with that suit, the CSS is just saying that we're either hearts or diamonds, so we'll need to be red.
You saved my OCD on that one. That was
good. Took this one. Now this is only 2/3 the size, right? 14 lines versus 21. We got rid of some unnecessary usings, removed the async and await keywords, and instead expressed it as the task returning functions. Put the property on top of our constructor. Express that as a single line. Now that we're using a dictionary for our players types rather than saying add, we can actually just say our player ID. The ID is a GUID. It's initialized internally in the constructor or the object initializer rather of our player, so that once it's initialized here, we know that the ID will have a new GUID. So that's what's going to map into our players dictionary. We're dealing correctly now. We've reversed our iteration of the for and the for each, popping out our deck and dealing out round robin style. I cleaned up some of the way that this looks now. So state players select, we're going to select that key value pair. The key is the ID. We're going to add the hand from our player. let's see, we got rid of count as a function. Instead, it's a member call. Instead of finding, we can just use that dictionary reference to our thing.
So much better.
So much cleaner, right? Got rid of that count. Again, minimizing our lines of code. Instead of creating a deck and then calling shuffle, now we just get, oh, we're doing double shuffle. See, this is why it's, now it's
Making
good.
Sure it's shuffled good.
It's really, well, yeah, I mean, a lot of times you'll shuffle it and then you'll shuffle it again. Not the end of the world. And again, these are tiny. It's 52 cards. It's not like a huge performance consideration. We took the player and we moved that into its own little thing. It's now in shared, and it's a record type rather than just being a class. And that's a proper record. There's records, which are, defined just instead of class saying record. And then there's this notion of positional records, and there's slightly different semantics with the two. So it's good to be aware of that. We got rid of some extra usings. We're using top level statements. So instead of 26 lines of code, we have 8 lines of code because our program, our program main entry point is implicit with top level statements. So we just use our server, the 2 hosting bits. We say create it the way it was before, build it and run it, which is really, really streamlined. And we're out in the startup. And then the startup got simplified a little bit too. There's a few things that are really interesting here. This is a lot based on the templates. And again, there's opinions with that. So instead of having this be just, this is really just a get only. And this is again from the template. So I just made it a read only field, and we have expressed that there. The nice thing is when it's a property like this with just get only, I didn't call attention to this, but in Visual Studio, it doesn't actually show you that it's not being used. Because it says public. So it just, I guess, I don't know if it doesn't examine that or not, or if it doesn't show like the references with code lens or anything. But when it's a private read-only field like this, it'll actually gray out and say it's not being used anywhere. So it would actually be safe to get rid of this constructor and the configuration. You could add it back later if you need to do anything with it. But that's another refactoring you might want to consider. We ended up adding the meme types. So that we can, instead of having the string literal, we can actually reference the octet here, which is that verbatim string anyways. We remove some of the comments. We made some of these lines closer together. So you end up kind of losing 10 lines of code. Card got cleaned up dramatically. So now that it's a record, we didn't need any of these usings. And it's in the shared namespace. So this is a positional record. So we still can override toString and do any type of regular class functionality that you'd want to. But instead, we defined it as a positional record. And if you recall, we had value and suit as the constructor parameters. Now those are the same thing, but as positionals, they're in the same order, and that's important. And then we have this optional is face down, and you can initialize it with face down set to false. And one of the things I didn't even show is like with expressions. So if we look at expanding this further, if we have, let's say this card right here, say if we wanted to get really fancy, var new card, we could say card dot with is face down true. Now this is a face down card, right?
So
this is
take the existing one, copy it, and make a new one face down.
Yep, it's a clone one. So it doesn't mutate the original. What it does is it clones it and then gives you a new instance of that card with those same values, except for this value is changed to face down being true or false or whatever it would be. So that's another thing that you could look at using that with type of expressions. And those are pretty powerful. So yeah, that's been cleaned up. We had some extension methods here for our card utilities. So we had shuffle functionality and we had creating a deck. We ended up getting rid of 5 lines of it. And we actually made a static read-only property of random. And if you do any reading on random, they talk about true randomness or closer to true. And you'd want to use ticks because that's unique to every time that this is instantiated versus the more predictable non-initialized or seeded this way random. So every time it's going to be seeded differently, which is important. And then the shuffle is pretty much the same. We just did a few different things with naming things, and we were able to get rid of the new list of T and just say new source because that's what it, with the implicit new in C#9, which is fun. And then we refactored the nested for each loops and building out of a list. So rather than instantiating a list and then for eaching over these things and then adding it in there and then returning the list, we can just express that with link chained methods. And then we have an iCollection. We have our player, which is a record. We removed a few things. So that's everything there. That's the full gambit of it. So I'm going to just hit create pull request. You have that there. It's yours to do with what you want.
Okay.
It's been awesome on the show. Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it. Do you have a heart out, David?
No, not at all.
We have a winner. I guess we had a $50 Amazon gift card to give away. I'm also merging this pull request while that comes in. So everybody stick around for just a minute here. And it looks like we had another pull request that came in. I don't know what it was for, though. So I need to double check that one. But I need to merge your pull request in. So let's do that one. Confirm that. And then let me check here. We've got, oh, Jonathan, Mr. JD. You are the winner of the raffle. So not only did you get a good shout out for your wonderful blog, by the way. Jonathan's got an amazing blog. I gave him a shout out earlier. If you want to share that again, feel free to. But you also won a gift card. So congratulations. I appreciate you joining me on the show. It's like up to the time. I wanted to show real quick, David. I want to get your feedback on this. So I'm going to try to merge or pull this pull request in real fast. And I want to show you this utility I was talking about.
Do it.
Let's see where it is. They moved my cheese on GitHub here, so I'm gonna pull.
By the way, this was a lot of fun. I've never actually done like a live refactoring before, so hopefully this was kind of like a behind the scenes into my mind and the way I think about things. And I'm curious because I didn't get to see lots of the comments. Was it well received? Did people like it? Was it?
Comments were good so far. Some people were saying it was a great show to show refactoring. So I think very well received from what I could tell. Let me see. Yes, it looks like I've got your branch here. So we were looking at...
well, it's been merged. You don't need my branch, right? You just need to...
Yeah, I was just looking at the history, and it showed your branch being merged. I wanted to make sure I had the latest bits. So this looks like the latest bits. We were looking at the card, was it? So it was under, was it shared components, playing card?
Playing card, yeah.
Yeah, we had this little bit here.
Line 1.
Line 1. Is it in the...
No, you're right. It's right there, line 1. The at CSS face down, at CSS down below. The bottom was the two strings. Yeah, there.
Oh, there we are. So I have this utility here, and I've got it in my docs. Or got the docs for, or had the docs for it up. I've got my other monitor is not working for me, so there we go. So you're going to see Hall mirrors every few minutes. So it's called CSS Builder and is up on GitHub or NuGet. It has full docs for working with this stuff. So what we can do is CSS Builder is a struct.
Nice.
And it's a very simple struct with some fancy APIs around it.
Okay.
So what we can do is we can say, I'm going to get a new string, and I have maybe a default CSS class, and I also have some conditional ones. So let's say, add this class, but only when something is true.
Okay.
So let's go back to dependencies and say, manage NuGet packages. We will... browse the global and say it's Blazor component. There it is. Blazor component utilities. That's what the NuGet package is called. We'll install that. We'll sign my life away to myself.
Can you zoom in a little bit? It's actually hard for my old eyes.
Oh, absolutely. Let's get back to... I don't know why these errors are coming up. So I don't know why it's saying there is no suitable override and state has changed is busted.
Clean. Got it
That
clean.
could be it because that merge that I just did.
Yeah, it's got old localized.
Let's see if rebuild takes care of it. Rebuild did it. AI insisted in telecode. Sure, why not? No reason to crash. No, I'm kidding.
Are you still? You're not connected to my live stream anymore, or my live share? I was just making sure. Oh, I still am sharing.
Is it still sharing your screen, not mine?
No. I'm saying
Okay.
my live share. Like you have a Visual Studio instance that's still connected to my Visual Studio. I'm going to cancel my live share, but keep going. Keep going.
Go ahead. So what we're going to do here is, first of all, I want to import that utility. So we'll say using Blazor component utilities, and then we'll go back to our playing card. And we should have this API now. So instead of having two different CSS values, so what the issue is going to be here is we have 3 CSS values up here.
Yeah.
So it could be pcard, and then there's a statically permanent space there.
Right.
And then there is another space here.
Yep.
So when we render this out, whether it's face down or whether it has a suit,
You end up with that nonsense.
spaces are going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So what we'll end up with is, it's not a big deal. Nobody actually sees it, but there's a class and then 2 empty spaces behind it, no matter what happens. So that's not ideal, but it's not going to break anything in the browser. But we are sending bits over the wire, so large scale on many components. This could add up, so that's a thing. So what we'll do is we'll say CSS builder, and then we'll just say card CSS, for example, or CSS card. What should we call this? Naming things is hard.
CSS builder default card styles for
Let's just say
this.
CSS card. We'll just call it card style.
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
Then we can throw this into a read-only property, and we can say CSS builder dot default, because remember we have a default value up here. Can we split this? Does that
pcard
still work in Visual Studio? Where's the splitter thingy? There we go.
Probably, maybe. Yes,
So,
you can do that.
there.
You can totally do that.
So we'll split this so we can see the little bit of code up here. This is what we're focused on. So we have by default, no matter what, this one is not optional. It has
pcard, yeah.
pcard, right?
Yep.
And then we have some optional ones in here. So we add a class of is back.
Yep.
We have a class of back
When is face down.
it is face down.
Nice.
Okay. And then we also add a class when, a class of what?
Always for the suit.
Card dot suit
Dot
to string.
dot to lower.
Oh, to lower.
When just true.
Oh, it's just always.
It's always.
Okay, so that one we'll leave alone. We won't have to put a when in there. That is an optional parameter. Okay.
So then you get rid of those 2 other styles and you say card style instead, and you can delete all of the other junk up at the top.
Exactly.
And since it's a CSS builder, do you have to say like to string on it, or?
So here's the thing. It is Razor. So what is Razor going to do?
To string it.
It's going to string it. So we don't need to call toString because there's an override in CSS Builder that says when you call toString to go ahead and do the proper concatenations and whatnot.
That's
and
hot.
Go ahead and give me the output because
That's
I know in the Razor markup, then I don't have to call toString up here or down here or anywhere else. If I did want to explicitly do it, though, I could either call toString or I could also say build. They override each other, but for semantics, you can have either.
I like it like this because it's implicit and I like that. I forgot to do this. I actually wanted to ask if you could refactor 2 additional things here real quick. The to display value and to display or to symbol, those 2 functions, those should be static. And the reason you'd want to make those methods static right there, line 33 and line 42, is because there's no reason for them to be instance-based. And what that does is it prevents you as the developer from going in there and trying to reference instance-based properties into it. So it makes you really think about your refactoring in the future.
Okay, good. Yeah, so what do you think of the CSS builder?
That's awesome. I absolutely love that. That's so much better.
And there are also methods in here. You can see there's 6 overloads if you look at this. So this is overloaded to the hilt. So you can do, this can be a bool value that it is defaulting to true. That's why we can get away with just not including it, and it's always there. Another thing is you can pass a function.
Sure.
Because sometimes what happens is this needs to be evaluated
multiple times or with each render or a change in state.
It can be if you're evaluating something that's null. If you just put a bool up here, I'm trying to remember how this works out, but you hit a null reference exception. So what you do is you wrap it in a function, and that function will check and set the value without hitting that null reference exception. So it's hard to explain without a good example, but it's there to pass in as a function, which gives you some more leverage. There are some use cases for that. Same goes with the string part. So you might want to pass in something that generates that string.
Right.
So you can pass functions in there. You can also pass in other CSS builders. So you can get really complex with these if you need to. And then there's overloads for all of those as well. This one is really nice. So there's something in Blazor called splat attributing or additional attributes.
Sure.
And this will automatically take the splat attributes and merge them for you. So if you have a class that is splatted on to the values that you want to also include with your CSS here, all you have to do is say add from class attributes, and it will merge them in to this chain and do that for you. So there's some
that's awesome.
There's some what are they called? Dictionaries that you'd have to search through if you didn't do that. Let's see, we can look at it here. I think there's an example in here. So you just call the extension method and tell it where to find those extra attributes.
Sure.
And it will go through and it will say if there's a class key in the dictionary, in this dictionary, then go ahead and merge it. And if it's not there, don't merge it. And if none of this stuff ends up producing any CSS, make it null, because if it's null, down here you can see an example.
Oh, okay.
If you just send an empty string, you get an empty class.
Got it.
If it's null, then it doesn't even render it.
Oh, that's so cool.
So there are helpers for all of those things to really streamline.
I feel like that should just be like part of like the experience. Like that should just be Blazor out of the box. That's so cool.
Yep.
Awesome, man. Kudos.
Thank you. So I like that method chain there. It goes with a lot of the stuff that you showed us today.
Absolutely.
We are definitely on the same page as far as the way we code. I like it.
Cool. Awesome.
So that wraps us up. We're 10 minutes over. I cannot see my chat window while I'm sharing my desktop because my other monitor died. So ignore the Hall of Mirrors and the man behind the curtain for a moment while I pull this off screen. There we go. Thank you once again, David.
Absolutely.
This has been a great show. Once again, you kicked us off, and now you're kind of bookending this for us. So greatly appreciated. I'm going to share in chat that thing I just showed.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. Yep. This has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I'm honored to have kicked the thing off and then now kind of put like the little bow on the end. I'm sure you guys are going to keep building this project out even more and adding different styling. And one of the suggestions I had to add earlier on was maybe an episode where you refactor out some of the controls and use Telerik controls. So Awesome.
Yeah, we could definitely do with some of the Telerik UIs in there. And then also we've got some good feedback in the chat as well, saying good job on the refactoring, Dave. It really was excellent to learn all of those new C# 9 things that I haven't got a chance to brush up on yet. Like I am knee deep in the brand new Telerik release right now. So we just released bits on Tuesday, and I've got a webinar next week. So I don't get time to like look at the C# 9 stuff on my own. So it's nice to have a guided tour with an expert. So
Awesome. Thank you
thanks
so much.
man.
Yep.
And,
Take care. Happy Friday.
Thank you all, audience. Dave, is there any links or anything you want to share before we go?
The only thing is check out .NETDocs.dev. That's our weekly stream for the .NET Docs show, and we're doctors of .NET, so we talk about all sorts of things like this. We've had Ed on our show before, and many other additional .NET community advocates. So we're happy to collaborate in that way. So check us out.
And that is a Twitch stream, by the way. So if you're on Twitch right now, you can search for that and add a follow for that show. And
that's the Visual Studio. Yeah, that's the Visual Studio Twitch.
At Visual Studio. Here, let's try type it in chat here. At Visual Studio. If you follow that channel, you will get alerts. I posted it everywhere, even YouTube and Facebook, so it doesn't apply to those channels. But if you're on Twitch, you should be able to click that, hit follow, and you'll get an alert when Dave goes live on his show.
Cool.
So
thank you.
Yep. Thanks again for joining us. And make sure you check out Telerik.com. And there's a yellow banner up top, and it'll tell you about the webinar that's coming up on Tuesday next week. So you can smash that button and sign up for the webinar. That would be awesome as well. Other than that, have a great weekend, everybody. And we will see you on Code It Live all week next week, and webinars and all that good stuff.
Bye, friends.
Take care, David.
Later.